do I want to shoot pinhole round here? Yeah, absolutely I do. Well, I've decided to come out today and explore some old mine working, some quarrying in North Wales, and I brought with me, what have I brought with me? I brought the Bronica. Yeah, I had to think for a minute there. The reason being, I've not brought the Bronica out with me for quite some time now. I've been shooting a lot of 35mm, a little bit of large format, but I decided today was the day to slow things down a bit and to be a little bit more considered.
That is the problem with the smaller formats, and digital in particular. You do tend to rush a little bit more. When you carry a big camera with you, a big heavy camera with expensive film, it does tend to slow you down and you get a more satisfying day, I find.
Well, I did consider shooting that last one there with the broken down old tree sticking out the quarry, but no, it didn't look that good really. The sky was too bright and it did look a bit cliched. Now, while I just catch my breath, I'm going to be having a look round this initial set of mine workings here, which have obviously seen better days. But there is another set a little bit further on, and I may explore those first. You see, the bigger set further away, about a mile or so, are more extensive, and also they've got a lot of old buildings, old barracks for the workers, and they look great on Google Maps, Google Earth. So I'm tempted just to have a bit of a recce round here and not shoot anything. If it's spectacular, I will shoot it. I'm not going to miss it in case the light changes. But if I go to the furthest part and work back, typically I find I get the best images. If I exhaust myself around this area, I'm not going to want to walk a mile in that direction. So I'll do the mile now.
Yes, I always like to do the bulk of the walking or the climbing as early on in the day as possible, because later on the enthusiasm dips and your energy levels drop as well. So best to go to the furthest point on the walk and make the most of those locations, and then come back to the ones you've recce'd earlier and see what you can pick up there.
Right, game on. I have some wonderful buildings over here, which I'm going to wander over to now, just as the rain come in, and it was promised to be totally dry today, of course.
Well, it was mainly dry, so I shouldn't complain too much. Just a bit of drizzle midday, really.
Well, there's so much going on around here. There are so many potential images, I imagine, when I get in amongst all the slate works and buildings, that I'm likely to be overwhelmed because it's not a place I've visited before, so I have no idea what exactly I'm going to be shooting. So I am half tempted to get over to some of the main buildings, put my bag down and sit there, have a think, and go for a walk, which will be the iPhone, and preview some shots before I break out the camera.
Well, this is definitely something that pays dividends for me when I do it, rather than start to shoot straight away or pick up a 35mm or a digital camera. It's better to wander around an area and get an eye for what's there, take it from different angles, probably put the bag down if it's a heavy bag like I should have, and then just really take your time and then come back to the good stuff.
Well, I just can't resist these little plants growing out of the side of the wall here. The contrast between the green and the dark slate is just, it is irresistible. But I don't want to set the Bronica up, and I'm hopefully only going to shoot black and white with the Bronica today, but I do have another alternative with me. See, what I brought along with me today is a new camera to spur my enthusiasm. Now, this is a strange camera. It's a hybrid camera. It's a Fuji Instax Mini Evo. Essentially, it's a digital camera with a little printer built in. So I can take the image, view it on the back of the LCD, and then spit a print out when I'm ready. Fantastic. Oh, my knees. Now, the nice thing about this camera, as I've just mentioned, is that it actually allows you to view the image on the back of the LCD, mess about with different lens setting or pseudo lens settings and effects before you actually take the picture. And then when you're ready, you pull this lovely little wind on lever here and it spits the picture out. So let's have a go, shall we? So I am going to set the lens to macro so I can get close in, obviously. And just using the little LCD on the back of the camera, I'm going to try and frame up something interesting, obviously. Obviously you want it interesting, that's the whole point of photography, Steve. If my knees hold out for long enough, actually I've seen something a bit easier which involves left bending. Right, these are fractionally easier for me to get at. I like that little grouping there, is quite nice. Yes, I like that, that's nice. Let's get in there. I think I'll add a bit of a vignette. Retro, normal, vivid, oh, that's nice, pale, canvas. Oh no, hang on a sec. I've got normal and I can set the lens to vignette or half frame. Here we go. Vignette, there we go, I like the vignette on that. Let's just dial down the exposure because it's a little bit bright. Press the button. Right, so put it in playback mode and you can see there I've got my little arrangement of the plants growing out the wall, and by a miracle, pull the little wind on lever and wait for the magic to happen. Bingo! Now just get a little bit of shelter from the rain while this develops. I don't know if water on Instax film actually affects it, but here we go. Get ready for us fast forward through this section.
Well, this is possibly the worst demonstration of an Instax developing ever, and of course the weather got to it.
Well, the wind and rain has other ideas about letting me show you that develop, so I'll show you when it's fully developed in a minute or so.
Well, I do actually quite like this. The colours are pretty good, pretty natural with that sort of soft look from a colour negative type film. But also the atmosphere and the vignette I've added, I think really bring the image in. It's nothing special, but I like it.
Now the strange thing is, the majority of analogue photography these days has a digital output. We scan our films, we print them out on inkjets or we show them on the internet. It's quite bizarre to think that this is a digital camera and the end result is a film image on chemically based film paper. It turns things on its head a little bit, and what it gives me as well is the ability to do a proper preview before I take a shot. I know you can use your iPhone and a preview device, but there's nothing quite like having a physical print to view because the light is reflected off the print as opposed to it being projected through a digital device, and it's quite a different effect and look. And I find, like in the old days of people shooting Polaroids as proof images, it gives you a much better idea of what your final result will be.
Now back to the main purpose of the trip, which I initially thought was to shoot with the Bronica. So I went round previewing my little iPhone device and I finally came up with something hopefully that will work.
Now, I imagined today was going to be a day of moody, gritty black and white photography with a bit of grain in there and quite stark results, maybe high contrast. But having said that and having taken that first little filmette shot with the Fuji, I actually like the colour of those ferns growing out of the walls. Now I've brought one roll of colour film with me today just in case. Well, one roll in the bag, there's some in the car. But it's Kodak Gold 200, not known for its vivid, striking colours and rich contrast, but that's what I've got, so that's what I'm going to load into the first back. Now I'm just switching over to my eye-level prism because the scene demands that I keep the sky out from this lovely little window here, and if I'm too low I get the sky in the top and it's too bright, so I'm going to have to go higher with the tripod, and that means I can't use the waist level finder because I'm not tall enough to look down on it. So here we go. If I can find somewhere, bloody hell, there's holes everywhere here. Be careful where I'm treading. Sometimes I wonder why I keep showing all these clips of me loading the film, but to be fair, it sort of does set the context around the shoot. People haven't seen film being loaded before. I'm sure it's a fascinating process. I just take it for granted these days, but you know, we have to consider that not everybody's as old as me and has shot film for as long, so yeah, it's quite interesting to see it set up. Here we go. Let's put it into the back of the camera and see if we can do it with one hand without breaking anything, and flip the back up and clip it into place, and when I get the dark slide out I'll wind it on. Actually I had the multiple exposure setting on, so I couldn't wind it on. I was messing about with the camera last night just making sure it works, because these Bronicas have a habit of not working at times, and you have to put fresh batteries in them and then take the batteries out. If you leave them in there for a few months, they'll show us working. When you press the little battery light button, the red light will come on. Shutter might fire once or twice and then it'll die, because they really do need to be fresh tip-top batteries. I'll probably do a whole video one day on some of the quirks of the Bronica, having suffered from its quirkiness over the years. Handled properly, it's a good camera. Even better still, I've got a spare in the car just in case it does go wonky. Okay, meter. Yes, I've got a meter, so I'm going to do some metering. Let's just have a quick look around the scene. let's worry more about the shadows than the highlights, because it's a negative film and I want to get a ton of exposure. Now I am going to shoot 2 frames here, 2. And I'm not doing a safety shot, I'm going to do one at f5.6 because I only want this front window sharply in focus and the background to recede out a little bit. I'm going to shoot the second one at f22, so I do have the option. I can choose later whether I like it sharp front to back or a bit soft. But metering, yeah, it's not too bad because it's such a soft day. I'll just go for overexposure to be absolutely safe with this colour print film. So I'm going to go for, what's the darkest area on here? I'm going to go for a 30th at f5.6. Okay, let's do that one first. So let's get the dark slide out, put it somewhere, we're not going to lose it. Okay, 30th at 5.6, everything focused up. Lovely, mirror up. Job done. And now, of course, if I go down to f8, that's one stop, 11, 16, 22, you're looking at another 4 stops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, half a second. f22. Bingo.
Well, no prizes for this one, sadly. I just don't like it at all, and I am having huge problems in scanning and getting colours right with this film, partly because I'm changing my entire digital workflow for scanning films. I might touch on that in future videos, but it isn't great. Oh, by the way, I did go for the f22 because it looked better with front to back sharpness.
You know, I've just done something a bit daft, really. I thought I had 2 backs with me today, and I haven't. I've only got 1 back with me today, and now it's got colour film in it. So, I've got to shoot the whole roll of colour before I can move on to something else. I was going to shoot maybe a bit of Delta 3200, but I do have another option. It's like a plan, this, isn't it? I do have my pinhole with me, my little 6x6 pinhole. Now, the nice thing about this is it's 6x6. This is 6x6. So they're going to be sort of a bit homogeneous. But just before I do, because I've got the colour film set up and I've got the Bronica set up, there is another very similar sort of composition, a set of compositions around here. It'd be quite nice, wouldn't it, to have another one which is quite similar in terms of the opening and the growth, you know, and the window in the back. So they might sit nicely together, a bit of a diptych maybe.
Well, sadly, no, I would say it's pretty much like the first one. I don't like the colours. The composition isn't that inspiring, so these two haven't worked for me. So, yeah, try something completely different, I think.
Right, so this is my little zero image pinhole camera with the pinhole open, because I've not wound the film on yet, so that's safe. So just going to make sure the pinhole is covered. The shutter lock, blue tack, is in place. Stop the shutter moving. And then just going to wind it on, which is painful because, as any of you will know, with Ilford films, the backing paper has the letters so faintly printed. I think even a 4-year-old with perfect vision would struggle to see much through it, and I'm not a 4-year-old and I haven't got perfect vision, so I'll just cut here because I could take quite a while with my old eyes trying to work out where it starts. Having whinged about that, it wasn't actually that bad, maybe because it's not too bright today. You can actually see things clearly without the glare of the sun on the little ruby red window. So I am actually not going to take the camera into any of these buildings just yet. I'm going to set off on a recce with this GoPro, because this GoPro has a very wide lens and it is quite a close approximation, or a good estimate of what I'm going to get with this particular camera. I've got it in wide mode as well, so apologies for the vomit-inducing weird perspective distortion stuff that might be going on. See, one of the problems as well is I am out of practice shooting with pinhole cameras, so you can't expect you just leap back into the mindset and getting your eye tuned in after, God, what, 18 months of using a thing. So yeah, this roll may not be super impressive, but the one thing I always tell myself, or try to remind myself, is when shooting pinhole, get really close up to the subject. None of that hanging back and worrying about things in the distance. You need stuff to be close. You know, you really do need to fill that frame. Now, this does look tempting, but the only problem is it's very dark in here. And I've got a very old-fashioned film, Rollei Infrared 400 in my pinhole camera. So with reciprocity failure, I could be here for a week or two. Having said that, it's bloody great, so I'm getting the camera out. Well, I was only half joking about these stupidly long exposures. I've pushed the camera in. It's going to get something like that. It may even get a bit of the tripod leg in, who knows. And I measured it, because it's about an f138. I measured it at 2 minutes. Now with reciprocity failure, that comes out at about 8 minutes. So I think I'll leave it on for 10 minutes and have a sandwich and you know, read War and Peace, and then come back to it and maybe leave it 20 minutes actually while there's a bit of a shower, and then probably try and get a few which are a little bit brighter. Maybe some of these look fantastic too. But you know, it's been running now for 8 minutes, but I think I might leave it for 15 or 20 because I'd rather have it a stop overexposed. It's quite dark in there. In the meantime, I've got to go hunting with this little thing. Well, after 15 minutes, I've had quite enough of that nonsense. So I'm going to terminate the exposure and wind the film on in a second. And I'll just put my shutter lock back on, blue tack, wind it on and find something else to shoot.
Well, no prizes for this one, although I did get the exposure just right. I'm pleased there's no solid black shadows apart from a bit at the top. I don't mind the composition, it's not bad. It isn't bad for 18 months layoff from pinhole, and I was probably close enough, and the ferns do make interesting patterns and shapes. And then there followed a period of wandering around these wonderful old ruins in the drizzle and the grey skies. You've got to be careful around here and watch your footing. There are little cracks and gaps and holes where your ankle will go down and get severely damaged if you're not careful. But look at this fantastic view here. This is the sort of workings I love shooting around, but really black and white.
Now, whilst I like it up here, it is raining quite a bit. It might not look like it on the camera. Now, I don't want to get the Bronica wet, so I think I might explore in the old mine working here. Probably was some sort of pump house or something with a steam engine, so maybe there's some winding gear and other interesting paraphernalia to photograph.
And indeed there are very interesting things to shoot round here, but it wasn't grabbing me. I wanted stronger compositions, and there's an awful lot of clutter and jumble and broken down slate and rock, as you can see here, and I couldn't really get something simple enough to suit pinhole or even a colour shot with a Bronica.
I'm faffing about because there is so much material here. I could have probably done with an initial recce using probably a digital camera, probably one of the Micro Four Thirds, and sort of got my eye in and identified by looking at the resulting images over the following weeks the most important type of shot I was after and the best vantage points. But I am here, I am lugging around my big heavy camera. Now the rain's eased off, I think I'll be shooting again. Righto, Bronica set up to shoot the old mine building with the chimney there and a bit of the slope in the background. I've got my wide angle 50mm lens on, so about 28mm equivalent, set to f16. Don't like to use f22 on this lens, and I don't need it in this instance anyway. The foreground is these rocks here, and the background is going to be fairly soft and indistinct really with this weather. Now I have put a 2-stop soft grad on. Now I wouldn't normally grad negative films, but the sky is very bright and it's quite bland. This will actually tone it down a little bit, and I might be able to pull a bit more detail out of it. Might leave a little bit more colour in the gold film because it's not very colourful. So 2 frames, 15th of a second, f22, and then we'll move on. Now something worth pointing out on this shot is that I have got a wide angle lens on, and I would like to have tilted the camera down a bit more to include more foreground and have just a little bit of sky at the top. But the problem with that is as you tilt it down, particularly a wide angle, you get the old diverging verticals. You know, the horizontal lines go out like that. When you point them up at skyscrapers, you know, they tend to converge. So it's one of those things where you can't do anything about it. That's just the laws of physics. But by tilting it down only slightly, the camera is only slightly tilted down. I don't know if you can see it. I can correct it later in Photoshop. I know it's cheating, but nobody prints these things in the darkroom much anymore, and it's very, very hard to achieve the same effect. So yes, cheat away.
Well, I prefer the composition and the balance of this one far more to the earlier two shots in colour. And the colour's not too bad, although still not up to portrait standards until I get my scanning sorted out. So definitely improving, but a work in progress nonetheless.
You know, I think I'll have one with the Instax as well while I'm here, because it looks really good. Let's stick it in vivid mode. Let's get that foreground in. Yeah, I like it. Let's print it.
Now, it's not to everyone's taste, but I actually prefer this to the shot taken with the Bronica. I think the colours are better. I think the lo-fi look suits it better. I love the way you've got that nice little rectangle outlining the print itself and keeping it within the frame. Overall, I think this is a real success.
I've actually got a slightly nicer angle on the building with the chimney by working back towards it and putting my longer lens on, my 80mm standard lens. The sun has just gone in. I have taken a safety shot though, because it still looks great. But the difficulty is I cannot quite stop the chimney from breaking the skyline. The reason is if I get back further to do that, I lose my foreground interest, which is two lovely little pine trees, little Christmas trees that are growing. So I've had to settle for it just breaking the top of the sky. It's not the end of the world. I'd rather have these trees in the foreground. Yeah, but hopefully the sun comes out, I'll get a second shot.
Well, I actually think the composition is worse here. That chimney just breaking the skyline does annoy me. I'd rather it was considerably more into the sky. And those two trees in the foreground are just lost really with this mess of a colour I have, which I'm going to need to spend some time sorting out.
Now I want to leave myself at least 2 frames on this roll of gold 200 for when I go back to the first set of workings. I go through that amazing dense forest area with those lush green mosses on those trees. They looked absolutely fantastic, so I need a couple of frames for that. There'll be very long exposures in there, so possibly one more shot with the Bronica, but I'd like to do more with the pinhole. I've just been previewing. Nothing's caught my eye yet. Having only taken 1 frame on that roll, I really need to use a few more up. Right, I have a very dull set of conditions on me now. It might not look on the video, but it's very dull. And I want to shoot the original buildings I was walking around on at the start of the video from up here. It's a great vantage point. I think it would look nicer in a grainy black and white film, probably Delta 3200 with the Holger, but I've got Gold 200 loaded and only got one back because I'm stupid. So I've used my 80mm standard lens, but what I have is a tighter crop by putting the 1.4 times converter on. Let me just show you that. The 1.4 times converter gets me that little bit closer without moving up to my 150mm lens. It gives me a sort of intermediary focal length, and that allows me to just crop out the sky and to just bring in the side so I don't get all this annoying scree on the side here. Have to add 1 stop of exposure, so I've gone for, what have I gone for? 15th of a second at f11.
Now finally I've got something I like the look of. Now this image is much more suited to this particular colour film. I've actually heard this location referred to as the Welsh Machu Picchu, and at first I thought that was ridiculous, but on second thoughts it does actually have that look of a ruined civilization. Now the colours are great, lack of sky works brilliantly, and also the square composition. So I think this is probably the best area to shoot in up here, and it's somewhere I will definitely be returning to.
Now I'm going to go down there and try and get some more pinhole images. It's just too good to be true, isn't it? And they might not be here again for a while. So one more problem as well. Whilst fumbling with the camera to put it away, I inadvertently triggered the shutter. So now I'm on frame number 12 of my roll of gold. Just 1 frame left for the forest section.
Well, I somewhat hurried the remaining frames in the pinhole camera. Well, not all of them. This one's okay. I actually do like the fact that everything's sharp, obviously, because there's infinite depth of field. But the rest of them were, I'm not even going to show them here. This didn't work because I cropped the top of the tree off. Should have tilted it back a bit further. This was just meh. There was absolutely nothing to recommend it at all. It was a very weak composition. And although this line of slates forming a sort of impromptu fence looked good, they didn't work in the resulting image, so I headed off to the forest instead.
Well, now that I've got back into the forest, it doesn't excite me as much as it did this morning because there's a lot more light around. It's not quite so mysterious and gloomy. That said, very nice avenue of trees leading down there. Obviously a plantation. 1 frame. Save the frame, shoot the frame. Save it, shoot it. Don't know. Tell you what, we'll compromise. I'll take one with a little Fuji Instax. Looks great on the viewfinder. Yeah, a bit bright that way, but I think into the actual trees themselves won't overload the 5 megapixel sensor. Okay. Oh, I like it as it is, so let's just print it. Now this bit never gets boring. There we go.
Okay, let's speed this section up. And again, a terrible demonstration of the development process here because I wasn't patient enough, but the image was awful. It was over contrasty, the highlights were blown, there was no detail in the bark there. I think it just overloaded the 4 megapixel sensor. So yeah, 5, sorry. Yeah, try again.
Well, I'm rather pleased in the end that I did save that final colour frame for something else, because something else is what I found. I've got a beautiful view of the lower mine workings and the valley behind, bathed in sun. I've used a polarizer to boost the sky a little bit and saturate the foreground colours, and I've gone for 30th of a second at f16. Everything should be in focus. It's a wide angle shot. Absolutely love it.
And yeah, it's not bad really. I do like the composition. The colours are still a bit off though, not as bad as the early ones because the light's better for the Gold 200, but it's still got weird tones going on. Although it's definitely worth revisiting, and I've got it marked down for another trip.
Well, I do wish I had another roll of colour film with me. It's back down at the car. I mean, I could walk back down to the car, but it's a hell of a walk back up here. It'll have to be that one or nothing. That's just the way it is. Anyway, I'll get this film developed. Might take one with the Instax from here. Still interested in the pinhole. Plenty of light now, so yeah, I think I'll go down to those workings.
Well, again, I do like the Instax one in this instance. I think the colours look great. Lovely little border around the image itself. Very pastel tones, reminiscent of something you'd shoot in the 1970s or 80s. Fantastic.
Now, I do like this particular setup for the pinhole. Obviously, I've got this ruin here with just the gable end left, but also I've got this wonderful foliage in the foreground, and if I'm lucky enough, these puffy white clouds against the sky. Now, I can't apply any filters or anything else like that, and I'm not sure exactly what my focal length is, so what I'm taking in on the scene, but I have taken 2 frames, 5 seconds and 10 seconds. It's very bright. They'd probably be a little bit overexposed, but I'd rather that than inky black shadows. So yes, the little pinhole is working a treat now.
Well, a little bit more success with the pinhole, although I'll be honest, I had too wide an angle and I had to crop out the right-hand side at the bottom quite a lot. It was just inky black. I do like the softness of those clouds. Probably should have got a closer though, and yeah, not following my own advice there, was I?
Well, I do enjoy this lower quarry actually. I think this is possibly the better location of the two, and it's a lot nearer to the car, which bodes well because I should be able to come back again in future. I mean, that looks good, doesn't it? Should break out the pinhole, but also there's a little tree. I think it's the tree I saw this morning, and it's looking a bit more interesting now, certainly for pinhole, but I think I've got to shoot that. Maybe, possibly. Well, I've gone for a low angle here because I want to emphasize these ferns in the foreground and also make the structure, the building, look more imposing. And there's a wonderful sky above it, so that will give a much more dramatic effect, nice and close, low down. Ideal for the pinhole, everything in focus obviously, everything in focus. Now, metering was quite tricky because depending on where I meter, there's some quite deep shadows. Am I bothered about those? Not so much really, because I've got to get the sky and the foreground right. So I've taken a guesstimated exposure at 1.5, 2 seconds, just by counting in my head, and then one at 5 seconds. It's such a good image. I'm actually not too worried if I don't get it today, because I would definitely come back here and shoot this again. I think I should put a roll of film in the Bronica, even if I don't finish the roll off. It's that good an image.
Well, this is the strongest pinhole image of the day because of the composition and the centering of that old ruin. The clouds look good as well. It was the initial 1.5 second exposure, which is very hard to time when you're just sliding a little piece of wood across as a shutter. The other one was completely blocked up in the sky, so really bright conditions, probably better off with a much slower film, maybe Pan F or something in the 25 ASA range.
Well, I've actually decided against shooting it with the Bronica. I've got it set up here, as you can see. Hopefully I can get you a view down the chimney there. And it's okay, but it's nowhere near as wide as the Pinhole or as dramatic. And to be honest, it's not as good, so I'm not going to start wasting film. Yeah, I love that building. I love that structure. Great with the light on it, so I know what time of day and time of year. And as I say, the car park's only just down here, so probably about 15-20 minutes plod. I could bring just about any camera I liked. Well, what a magnificent little specimen that is on its own. Looks like something Ansel Adams would have shot in the High Sierra about 100 years ago. But this is not the High Sierra, it is Wales, but no less dramatic for that. Well, I'm going to try it. Not totally convinced because there's a lot of stuff around it and it's very awkward to get into position, but I think here, probably looking up to the sky, don't forget it's a square format, is probably the best option.
No, not fantastic. The lighting's good and everything else, but I don't like the composition. The tree's too bright against the sky. It's okay for a Pinhole. Technically the exposure's right and everything else, but it doesn't work. Well, that was great fun. I finished off the roll in the Pinhole the right time, I think, on that tree. Don't know if it's going to come out or not. But overall, a roll of Gold 200 for a change. Never shot that before, so that'll be interesting to get it back developed. Shot 4 little Instax pictures. The other thing about little Instax is you can send images to it from your mobile phone after editing them, so it's an all-in-one printer solution. So anyway, shooting with 3 cameras on the day, not ideal. It did confuse me a little bit. I was swapping around and couldn't really get into a groove with any of them. I think I probably preferred the Bronica, to be honest. I wish I'd had another roll of colour film as well. So this is a location I will definitely come back to. I'm thinking, to be honest, wet and windy weather in winter, 1600 speed film, either 35mm or possibly the Holga 120. But definitely a location I'll come back to again. So I hope you enjoyed this video as ever, and I will see you again on the next one. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.